Hello friends, welcome to my another lecture on interviews and selection today. In my last lecture, we discussed something related with the testing part. Since we are talking about the recruitment and selection, so I discussed the test at length. So when we were talking about tests, there are basically ARP kind of tests, which is there where we check the aptitude, ability and the personality testing is done for the candidates. Or in other words, we can say the aptitude, ability and the personality tests are administered to check the various aspects of a candidate. Now, when I was talking about selection also in my previous lectures, I gave you a gist that, okay, there are interviews which are conducted. Now, today what I wanted to tell you all is like, what are the different kind of interviews that can be conducted for the people and what kind of arrangements have to be made from the interviewer side also and from the interviewee side also. So definitely any interview which is being conducted, it is important for both of them. So as you can see on the screen also that interview is nothing but it's just a kind of a formal conversation that takes place between the interviewer and the interviewee. And the most important part is that in the case of interview, it gives an opportunity to both of the parties to grab or to get more information about each other. From the interviewer side, if you see, then definitely in employers, they are able to grasp the skills and scrutinize their personality and character attributes. Both of them, whether it is the personality or the character attributes, they are important for the company because we want to get the right set of people entering the organization. So this is what I was talking about, that we check the personality traits also. So because of the interview, we are able to understand each other in a better way. The interviewee can clear their doubts in a better way, and definitely the employer also can give lot of information which the other wouldn't have been able to give it. So it's more or less like as you can see in the second point, it's all mentioned that the inter and view, that means seeing each other. So when they see each other, naturally the information will also be getting exchanged between the two. So we know that any interview that is being done, it's a very important part of the selection procedure. And definitely we are again trying to identify the job related proficiency, abilities and technicalities. So again, this is all done with the help of different kind of tests that we did it. And test is one way by which we check all this, but again with the help of interviews we can get along well with the candidate and we can delve deeper into various aspects. So definitely, as you can see, that an interview is just a conversation between the prospective employer and a candidate. During this official meeting, the employer asks questions to gather information from the candidate. Interviews are typically held at the end of the recruitment process to assist the employees in selecting a suitable candidate for a job. So when we're talking about interviews, it's a very, very important part of any selection test. Now, again, you have to bear in mind that there can be different kind of interviews, but the company will not conduct all kind of interviews for all candidates. So definitely, it will be again dependent upon the kind of the job and the employer to make a decision what kind of interview has to be conducted between them. Then, if we talk about interviews from the point of view of the employer, then we know that basic steps have to be followed. For example, it is all related, as you can see, that it's all related with giving a brief about the position and the job and reporting structure. So anyone who's taking the interview, they should also know about the company, and anyone who's appearing for the interview, the person is expected to know about the company. Then we should explain the structure of the interview, follow a checklist. Now, when we are talking about the checklist, it is all related with the composition of the panel. It is like any exercise which has to be done or any testing has to be done, or what will be the location of the interview, or what will be the time table that has to be followed. Or for example, there can be any kind of structured questions or any strategy or any kind of note taking, anything. So all these things, they are actually related as a checklist. So we need to find out that what kind of panel we are going to have. Can we have the panel from internally only, or we are going to get some experts from the outside. So all those decisions have to be taken. Then again, follow a pattern of questions, both technical and behavioral. In the case of interviews, it can be formal and informal also, that I will be discussing in just few minutes from now. So as an interviewer, the person should have few questions in mind, that what kind of question the person is going to ask. then making notes or being very composed. So we don't have to respond to the candidate during the interview. It says that we have to be very composed. Don't try to react to the responses of the candidate. At time we have to very patiently listen to the talks that is being done by the candidate. So it is very difficult to develop, yet very essential qualities. So listening listening skill has to be very, very strong enough for the interviewer. Please don't judge on the looks of the candidate. This is very, very essential, that in case of interview, it is expected that okay, the person should come very neatly dressed following the ethics of interviews, but definitely we do not have to judge the looks of the candidate, because that is not the only criteria for the job. So we have to check the different traits. As I told you earlier also, that is the AAP, that is our ability, aptitude and personality. So these things, they have to be checked at length to see that whether the candidate is good enough for a job or no. Then personality, presentability in candidate is definitely required. Don't get carried away by the candidate who have excellent communication skills. So that can be one of the deceiving part. Communication is important, but it may not only say that okay, if a person is good at communication, he or she may be good with all these ability, aptitude and personality traits. And also, if time permits, be a part of all the technical interviews. So as I told you earlier also, that it's not necessary that the company will do all kind of interviews, and at times they can be just one round of interview, they can be 2 rounds of interview, they can be 3 rounds of interview, one by maybe the preliminary interview, maybe one round by with the executives, maybe one round of HR interview. So it all depends upon the company that what kind of job you are applying for and what kind of interviews the person is interested in conducting. Now, when we are structuring the interview, as you can see that when we are structuring the interview, there is a word GASP, G-A-S-P. That means every interview should have a structure which is clear and transparent to both the interviewers and the candidate. So it's like greeting. So it's like interviewers should provide provide candidates with an outline of the interview process, introduce the participants, tell the participants when they will be able to speak or ask questions, confirm the follow-up process. So instructions have to be given. This is basically more in the case of a group interview. I will be discussing that also. Second, GASP A is like acquire. That is, interviewers should gather information by use of open, close and probing questions following agreed questions format based on agreed question criteria. Ensure that discriminatory question format based on agreed question criteria. Ensure that discriminatory questions are not asked. Now, we do not have to ask any question which can offend any of the candidates. So, any question related with their personal words, anything which is too personal, we should not ask such question. Anything which is like too personal, it has to be avoided. Then, the third one, as you can see on the screen, is related with the supply. GASP. Now, S is basically supply. So, interviewers should supply appropriate and accurate information by being aware of the questions and queries that candidates are likely to ask. Now, what does this mean, likely to ask? Definitely, since interview is just a two-way process where the interviewer is also asking question, you can also ask question. There is an exchange of information between both of them. It is important that the interviewer should also keep in mind the questions that can be asked by the interviewer, and interviewer should also keep in mind the questions that can be asked by the interviewee. Then the last part, as you can see, is the part. Interviewers should ensure that candidates are clear on what happens next, in particular how and when they will hear the outcome of the interview. Ensure that any administrative details that are your responsibility have been dealt with. Now, what this point number 4 says, that all the information which has to be given to the candidates, they have to be well communicated to them at the right time for the right purpose. So, as you can see on this number part 4, that people should be clear what next has to be done. Now, let me come to the most important part of the today's lecture. What I want to discuss in length is the different kind of interviews that are actually taken. As you can see on the screen, it's all related with the informal, formal interviews, depth interviews, stress, group, panel, sequential, telephonic interviews, impromptu interviews, structured and unstructured interviews. So, when we talk about the informal interviews, actually, as the word itself is telling us, that it is not in the formal setting. It is a very, very informal one. It can take place anywhere. There is no specific location for it. As you can see, the main purpose is to know about the initial details about each other. When I talk about each other, it is basically the employee and the company people. It can be related to questions like asking name, place of birth, name of the relatives, previous employer. It is unplanned interview and there is no preparation done for it. So this is a kind of informal interview. When I talk about the formal interview, you can see that there's a proper dress code that one has to follow. There is a formal setting where, the interviewer and the interviewee sit across the table and then they discuss things. And there's a proper setting which is done. So in the case of informal interview, it can be done at any point of time. It can be even in the cafe where people can interact with you. So this is one of the most important kind of interviews. And in the case of formal interviews, where there is a formal environment, the questions which are asked, they are of more structured nature. The place, time, documents required to be brought in by the applicant, and they are well decided and communicated by the office staff. So anyone who is coming for a formal interview, then the person will be properly dressed up with proper papers in their hands along with their originals. And it says that a behavioral interview is a style of interviewing where the job applicant is asked to give examples of situation he has personally been involved in, where he has demonstrated a particular trait. So this anything which is like this, then definitely is a part of our formal interview. The second one, as you can see on the screen, is related with the depth interviews. Now, when we talk about the depth interviews, it's actually basically designed to intensely examine the candidate's background and their thinking, and to go into considerable detail on particular subjects of an important nature or of special interest to the candidate. So, as you can see, there are more of the probing questions which are asked by the interviewer with tactics. And it says that supposing if a candidate says that, okay, the candidate has some interest in tennis, then a series of questions may be asked to test the depth of the understanding and interest of the candidate. So this is more of a probing questions are asked. But my dear friends, what is more important to keep in mind is that whatever you are mentioning in your CV, you should be very, very thorough with it. And these probing questions, they are always asked with tactic, and there is a thorough, exhaustive analysis which is done. So it is only possible when we have that exhaustive analysis, only then we are able to get a good picture of the candidate. Then another type of interview which is there, it is known as the stress interview. As you can see in the picture also, there's a panel and there's a candidate. The situation is made in such a way that the person feels irritated, frustrated, and the person comes under the stress condition. So one of the main motive of the stress interview is to find out how well a person is going to handle stress. So here it says that stress is very rampant. Rampant basically is very common in the organization. And stress is the reaction people have to excessive pressures or other types of demands which are placed upon them. So it arises when they worry that they can't cope up, or stress is the wear and tear our minds and bodies. So it says that many experts claim it to be the fastest growing occupational disease with debilitating health effects, and stress indeed comes out with bad effects. So any interview which is there as a stress interview, there's a challenge for both the people who are asking the question and the person who is facing the question. The main purpose of this kind of interview is actually to evaluate how well a candidate can handle uncomfortable situations. So it says that stress basically occurs when pressure is greater than the resource. So you have to understand that the stress interview is only done with the motive to find out how well you can actually handle a situation or any situation where you are not comfortable. So stress interviews are basically conducted for that purpose. The another example which we can see on the screen is related with the group interview. So, group interview is nothing but a group interview is when candidates for a particular job are interviewed at the same time. They may take place before one to one, so employers can decide who to interview for the next round or afterwards. So employers can cut down the list of people they are considering for the job. So once we have the group interviews, we can get a bird's eye view. Who are the people who can go to the next round or who have the capacity or the ability to qualify for the next round, and they will do well. Basically, it is designed to save busy executives time and to see how the candidates may be brought together in the employment office and they may be interviewed. So, definitely this is a kind of an interview which helps us to save on time, and it also helps us to cut down the list. So, once the list is less, so definitely it becomes easy for the company to go on to the next round. Then, as you can see on the screen, there is an example of panel interview. Now, when we talk about panel interview, basically what is a panel? Panel is nothing but it is a kind of a combination of different experts from different areas, and they will be asking questions from the candidates relevant to the area. And when we have the panel interview, so at that time we can always have the stress interview also. So, a panel or interviewing board or a selection committee may interview the candidates. Panel interviews are actually conducted to analyze the candidate's skill set and the candidate's overall efficiency in handling a team of members with multiple questions. The main purpose is to again check how the person is going to handle the situation. And it is said that through this method, multitasking ability of the candidate, pressure handling ability, mental ability to concentrate on each question, and his or her experience is evaluated. So, how well a person responds to multiple questions, how the person maintains the poise without getting irritated, without getting frustrated, is all evaluated in the panel interview. Panel interviews are nothing but the candidate might have to attend an interview with multiple interviewers. This type of interview actually helps in collective judgment. This is very important. Collective judgment and wisdom of the panel experts in the process of judging the candidate. Now, collective judgment is like if the candidate is good enough, only then the panel will give their suggestion, and then the unanimous decision is taken on how well the candidate has actually performed, whether the candidate was able to live up to the expectation of the panel or no. So, there is a lot of collective judgment which is taking place. The next interview that you can see on the screen is the sequential interviews. Sequential interviews are also a part of the selection process, and in the case of sequential interview, it takes the one-to-one a step further and involves a series of interviews, usually utilizing the strength and knowledge base of each interviewer, so that each interviewer can ask question in relation to his or her subject from the candidate. As the person moves from one room to another, sequence basically means step-by-step movement. So, maybe the person can have one interview, then the person goes on to the room number 2, then the person goes on to the room number 3, and then the questions can be asked from the person. So, it is said that this type of interview is basically used if the position requires teamwork or cross-departmental efforts. So, sequential is basically, it says that there are several interviews in turn with a different interviewer each time. Please understand that every time there is a different interviewer, and every interviewer has its own skill set or the expertise in a relevant area. So, again the collective judgment would be done here, and maybe the person clears the interview from one room, then the person may be asked to go on to the another one, and it can be either just one round, it can be it can be related to number of other rounds also. So, it is more of the the prerogative of the interviewers, or where we are actually seeing or utilizing the strength and the knowledge base of the interviewers. Then the next example that you can see on the screen is the example of a telephonic interview. Now, telephonic interviews, they can serve two purposes. Now, telephonic interview is basically, of course, as we know, we can take the bliss of the technology and the person doesn't have to come physically and appear before the panel or a single interviewer or the panel interview. The person over the phone only, one can understand or speak to the candidate. Basically, it is done at the initial round of hiring, and the initial round of hiring just to see whether the person is interested for a job or what kind of experience the person has, what are the qualifications, just to get a bird's eye view of the salary expectations also. So, in case if the person says, if the person shows the interest that okay, the person is interested in coming and coming physically, or maybe now we have the Zoom platforms, things have become much more easy. So, ideally telephonic interviews are done at the initial phase just to check the whether the person is interested, what kind of expectations the person has from the company. So, job seekers, they can also decide which company to go for and which company not to go for. Then, another kind of interview which you see on the screen is the example of impromptu interview. Now, this interview commonly occurs when employers are approached directly and tends to be very informal and unstructured. Basically, in this type of interview, what happens is that the applicant should be prepared for the on-the-spot interview. Anything can be asked from the candidate. In this case, the employer generally tries to find out whether the candidate may be interested for the formal interview at a later stage or no. So, as you can see that on the screen also, it's like on the spot, the questions can be asked, and again the employer is trying to figure out, going a deep level or unearthing another level to find out whether the person will be interested for the next round or no. Please understand one thing, my dear students, that when a person applies for a job, it is not necessary that he will be doing the job at all places. He will be making a selection, he will be selecting or accepting a job offer which gives him or her the maximum satisfaction. So, there may be companies who may be asking people, because even they want to save on time and energy. They want to know that okay, if the person is interested, only then we go for the second round, else we do not go for the second round. Then, as you can see on the screen, there are some examples of the structured and the unstructured interview also. In the case of structured interviews, as the name itself is telling us that in a structured interview or at times called as pattern interview, the interviewer uses preset standardized questions which are put to all the interviewees or the candidates. With the help of this kind of interview, we can get valid results. It is usually helpful when the company is interviewing a large number of applicants. There we actually require the structured interview. An interview can have a set of sequence of questions, and these questions, they can be related with the situational questions can be asked, behavioral questions can be asked, job related questions can be asked, puzzling questions can be asked to check out the box thinking of the candidates. So, this is one of the standard form of interview which is actually done, and the interviewers are well prepared beforehand which are the questions which have to be asked or which are the capabilities to be assessed. It can be related with aptitude, it can be related with ability, it can be related with personality. On the other hand, if you see, there is an unstructured question also interview. Unstructured is basically unpatterned, anything which is unplanned interview, and it is largely unplanned by the employer. It is a kind of a more friendly interaction between the interviewee and the interviewer. It is during this process that the interviewee reveals his or her most of the desires and problems. At times what happens, my dear friends, that in a very structured format, people are very formal, they may be getting nervous, they may not come out of their true selves. But in the case of unstructured interview, they feel more comfortable because the environment is such that they can divulge themselves, they can vent out themselves in a better way. So, here the desires and the problems can be well identified in the unstructured interview. However, one of the biggest disadvantage with this kind of interview is that there is no uniformity, and above all, it may overlook the key skills of the applicant. Anything which is in the formal environment, definitely it has its own advantages, and anything which is in the informal way or the unstructured way, it has its own advantages. So basically, unstructured interview, it is useful when the interviewer tries to probe personal details of the candidate. But in case if anything which is related with work, anything which is related with job, anything which is related with situation, anything which is related with behavior, then at that point of time, we require the structured interview rather than the unstructured interview. Now, this is a very important and a very interesting slide that I have put, and again, these things, they are all mentioned in my book only, Human Resource Management by Dr. Rakhi. And it says that what are the different types of questions which are asked in an interview. At times, people have no idea, but we all know that in an interview, number of questions are asked. But let me give you a gist of it, like what kind of questions are asked. Because asking the right questions at the interview is the most obvious task that a panel member has to do. It's easy to think that asking question is quite an easy process, but the most experienced interviewers will tell you that there is a real art to phrasing the questions to gain exactly what the information is needed. Listening to the answer is less visible but equally important part of being a panel member. So if you happen to be one of the panel member, or if you happen to be one of the interviewee, please keep in mind that such questions can be asked from the panel experts. For example, the first one which you can see, for example, there can be some kind of open-ended questions can be asked. So, in the case of open-ended questions basically encourage the flow of information. Questions usually begin with words like what, why, when, where, tell me something about yourself, or how how you will do it. As you can see on the screen also, that what kind of work do you enjoy? So this is a very open-ended question that okay, we are trying to go deep down and find out the personal information. Or maybe something like tell me something about the project that you are currently working upon. So this is a very open-ended question, and then of course the encouragement is given to the candidate for an expansive response. Tell where the interviewees will usually respond well to the open-ended question because they are free to express themselves. Then the second question that you can see on the screen is like close-ended question, like not much choices are given to the people, and it's like closed questions are direct and focused. Something that they should not be used as they only lead to yes or no questions. So it's like says, have you attended the conferences this year? The answer could be either yes or the answer could be no. However, these questions are useful for concluding and summarizing part. Or for example, it can be, did you personally supervise the candidates, or did you personally supervise any of the students? So the question would be yes or no only. The third one which you can see on the screen is related with the probing question. Okay. So probing is basically this one. I'm going delving deep down, and we are going to find out more something about the situation or any problem, or we are obtaining more details about something. Then here the main purpose is to draw out more information about specific points, aiming for depth rather than the breadth of the information. For example, you enjoyed your project last year. Which aspect, it's written here, which aspect gave you the most satisfaction? For example, here the probing is like, okay, you are giving the person the thought that, okay, there's a project, but which part of the project made you more happy and satisfied? So this is more of a probing question. The next question that mentioned that is the leading question. Now leading questions are directive and always indicate the preferred answer, or the interviewer's opinion is there. These are not the productive in obtaining the depth or qualify the information that they want. So it's like leading. For example, I expect you prefer to work in a team. That means the interviewer, is giving a kind of instructions to you where you do not have any say, much say rather. For example, you will be willing to work every other Saturday morning, aren't you? So again, we are just, if such a question is posed by the interviewer to the interviewee, that you will be willing to work every other Saturday morning, aren't you? The person will only say yes or no. So there is not much choice left in the hands of the interviewee. So there are some kind of leading questions which are at times more of a dominating nature, which can be asked in the interview. Then the next one is relating with the hypothetical questions. As you can see here, hypothetical questions. Now, hypothetical questions are basically open in style and they generally pose a what if. Here, if you can see this, here, so they talk about what if. What if. So, like, what if condition is being implemented here in the case of hypothetical question or scenario. They can be useful in analyzing knowledge, attitudes, reaction, creativity and speculative thinking. However, in setting such a scene, one needs to be very careful that everyone would understand the basis of the question and the sub-content of the scenario. For example, if another member takes the credit of your work, what would you do? So this is just an hypothetical question. The situation has not yet arisen, but yes, you are being placed in such a scenario that if this happens, what would be your reaction? So again, here the person is trying to identify the knowledge base, the person's attitude, reactions, creativity, and how well the person can answer such questions. Then there can be some kind of linking questions. For example, it's interesting to hear that you, for example, you've done something right or wrong. Now I would like you to ask. So there's a link between this. But it's interesting to hear that you like tennis, for example. Now I would like to ask, what are the different rules which are used in tennis, playing tennis? So this is a kind of a linking question. So you have to be very careful that the information that you are mentioning, it has to be such that in case if any linking question related to that is asked, you are able to answer. Lastly, there can be some kind of behavioral questions also. Apart from that, behavioral questions at times, the interviewers also ask the multiple choice question also. Multiple choice question is basically where they can ask any question and then they can give you 3-4 choices. And then they ask you. So again, the main purpose is to check the applicant's reaction or creativity or the attitude or the knowledge base. In the last behavioral question, we are trying to understand how a person behaves. When you are under pressure to complete a task, what strategies do you follow? So, behavioral questions will seek advice from the past as an indicator of future performance. They are similar in nature to hypothetical questions, but they can measure knowledge, reactions, thinking part, but they do so on the basis of something the candidate has actually experienced. In the case of hypothetical question, the person has not experienced that situation, but in the case of behavioral question, the person has already passed that phase, the person has passed that scenario or is in the current scenario, and then the person is asked to do or asked to answer the questions. So my dear friends, these are the different types of questions which are actually asked in the interviews. So if you are planning for any selection as an employer, or if you are asking or if you are going as an employee for any interviews, please be very careful that such questions can be asked, and be very careful about the things that you have mentioned in your CV, because with those content, there can be some kind of linking questions, there can be some kind of hypothetical questions, there can be some kind of behavioral questions that can be asked by the panel. Now, one of the most interesting slides, I have it for you on the screen. This is again from my book only. Now, at times people have no idea what are the parameters on which a candidate is generally judged, or what is the kind of assessment is judged. People feel that, okay, no, I answered all the questions, I should be through with the interview. But it's not so. It's just not the technical knowledge that is evaluated. There are other factors also that have to be considered. For example, as you can see on the screen, like for example, the qualification part, the job knowledge, how well the person has the knowledge of the job, because that is the most important part. That is why you are being recruited or selected. The experience, the personality. So the personality is just not the the kind of clothes that you wear, but of course your appearance, your mannerisms, your ethics, all they are part of your personality only. The kind of dressing, the tone the person is using, or at times people have got very charming personality. At times people may be rude, people may be rough. So one has to check. So on that parameters also, the person can be checked 1, 2, 3, like from lowest to highest. Or maybe awareness about the technical dynamics. This is more of a technical job where we talked about the technical testing also, or mechanical testing. Then interpersonal skills. For example, if you have a good personality, you have to keep I, me and myself at bay. That means if you are coming for a job, there shouldn't be too much of I, me and myself. So the company will definitely check whether you have that kind of interpersonal skills or no, or the team spirit. Then maybe number 7, attitude towards the task, people and technology, whether you have that kind of empathy, whether you have that kind of caring nature, so on and so forth. The confidence level, this is very, very important. In any of the selection, if any interviews are being conducted, the confidence level is actually checked. Your hand movements, the way you sit, the way you respond, the way you fiddle, all those things. Then age group suitability. People may come and apply for different jobs, but that job should be suitable as per your age category. Then number 10, if you can see, the communication skills. For any job, the skills, they are of paramount importance, especially for the jobs which involve interaction with the people. For example, I had given you the example of PRO, Public Relation Officer. There the communication skill is of paramount importance, or anything which is related to the marketing job. Then business orientation. How well are you there for the business? Your individual goals, they should not clash with the business goals. Then analytical skills, clarity of thoughts. It all depends how you are answering the question. So clarity of thoughts is also very important. Then you can see something which is mentioned as maturity. Like in the case of recruitment and selection, the person has to be mature enough to understand the situation, handle the situation, make decisions. Then the maturity level is also checked. Then the achievement part, how well you have achieved. This is the kind of test that we did, if you remember. They were achievement tests that were conducted, or the achievement or the assessment test. Then the conceptual clarity of the job, openness of the mind, whether the person is open-minded or closed-minded. This is also very essential, because once you're working in an organization, you come across all sort of people. So people who are very close-minded, so they are actually avoided. Then leadership abilities and proactiveness, like how well you are there, what kind of skills you have. So it's just not, what I'm trying to tell you is here, that it's just not the answers that you make, but these are the parameters that a company will be checking you on. Then your personal profile, your personal achievements, what you've done, how you are there, or the career plan, the way you answer the question, all these things are taken into consideration before you go ahead. Then there can be some kind of general observations also. For example, your expected salary, offered salary, and then what kind of salary you were drawing previously, and then the assessment and the committee members, they give their views. So this is just a format that I wanted to give you, that it is just not the technical aspect. One should not feel that, okay, I answered all the questions and I will make it through the interview. So there can be different parameters on which a candidate can be evaluated. So that is why it is said that recruitment and selection is not easy, because evaluating different candidates on number of factors is a very, very tedious task. That is why the companies, they are very, very particular, they are very, very skeptical, or they are very careful about the people who are going to come and join the company. So naturally, every company, they want best suited people to come forward and contribute in the success stories of their companies, so that both of them or all of them, they keep pushing the boundaries and they take the organizations to the next or the highest level. Thank you so much. So this was all related with the different kind of interviews that are there in the case of recruitment and selection. I hope the concept of recruitment and selection would be much more clear to you by my previous lectures. Hope to see you in my next lecture. Stay tuned and thank you so much.